Commander HFY floated in the command sphere of the Galactic Council Station, his tentacles rhythmically pulsing with anxiety as he reviewed the emergency transmission for the 100th time. The holographic display cast eerie shadows across his translucent skin, each pulse of data sending ripples of bioluminescent color through his body. Around him, representatives from 17 different species gathered in tense silence. Their various appendages, sensory organs, and communication devices all focused on the same horrifying message. The Korthax delegate, a crystalline being whose body chimed with each movement, was the first to break the silence. The swarm, it resonated, its voice like whined through glass chimes. We thought they were contained in the dead zone. How could they have breached the quantum barriers? HFY's primary eye cluster swiveled to focus on the Korthax. The barriers have held for 2 millennia. Something must have changed. Something fundamental. He manipulated the holographic controls with practiced precision, bringing up star charts that showed the inexorable advance of the swarm. Red dots spread across the display like a plague, each one representing a consumed star system, a civilization reduced to raw materials for the ever-hungry collective. The swarm was unlike any threat the galaxy had faced before. They weren't conquerors in the traditional sense. They didn't subjugate or enslave. They simply consumed. Entire planets stripped bare in days, their biomass and minerals converted into more swarm units. They moved through space like a cosmic locust plague, leaving nothing but empty void in their wake. No negotiation was possible. No surrender accepted. They communicated only in the language of consumption and conversion. Ambassador Threx of the Melody stepped forward, her serpentine form undulating gracefully despite the gravity of the situation. The Melody were artists and philosophers, believers in the power of communication and understanding. Even now, faced with extinction, she sought a peaceful solution. Perhaps if we could establish communication protocols, understand their needs. The harsh bar came from General Krathos of the Vorthan Empire. The massive, armor-plated warrior's 4 arms crossed over his chest in a gesture of dismissal. They need to consume. That's all. We've seen the recordings from the Outer Rim colonies. There's nothing left. Not even bacteria. HFY extended a calming tentacle. The Council couldn't afford to fracture now. The General speaks truth, but anger won't save us. We need solutions. He turned to the quantum physicist from the Etherian Collective, a being of pure energy contained within a specially designed environmental suit. Dr. Yalix, your analysis of their movement patterns? The Etherian's form flickered as it processed calculations at the speed of thought. Based on current trajectories and consumption rates, the swarm will reach the core worlds in approximately 47 standard cycles. Given their exponential growth pattern, by that time, their numbers will have increased by a factor of the being paused, its energy field dimming. The mathematics suggest total galactic consumption within 100 cycles. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. 100 cycles, less than a standard year. The entire galaxy, every civilization, every world, every life form, reduced to nothing more than raw materials for an ever-expanding tide of consumption. There must be something we can do, whispered Counselor V of the Aquari delegation, her water form trembling. The combined fleets would buy us perhaps 10 cycles, General Krathos interrupted. The swarm adapts to every weapon we use. Energy beams, they absorb. Kinetic weapons, they incorporate the materials. Biological agents, they analyze and become immune. We tried everything in our arsenals. It was then that the youngest member of the Council, barely past her species' first molting, raised a trembling appendage. Cadet Lyrics of the Xanathi Scout Corps had been included in the emergency session only because she'd been the one to first detect the breach. There might be one option we haven't considered. All eyes, optical organs, and sensory apparatus turned to her. HFY's chromatophores shifted to an encouraging hue. Speak, Cadet. Lyrics' voice modules struggled to form the words. The Forbidden Sector coordinates 247.3 by 185.7 by 92.1. The Quarantine Zone. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Several delegates recoiled physically. The Korthax's crystalline structure vibrated with a discordant note. Even General Krathos, veteran of 1,000 battles, took an involuntary step backward. Absolutely not, Ambassador Threx hissed, her usually melodious voice sharp with fear. Those creatures are quarantined for a reason. They're even more dangerous than the swarm. More dangerous than total extinction? Lyrics pressed, finding courage in desperation. The historical records are clear. When we first encountered them, they were already engaged in combat with a swarm tendril that had entered their system. And they won. They won by being more savage than the swarm itself. The Etherian's energy field sparked with agitation. The recordings from the First Contact War are sealed for good reason, Zexai interrupted, though his own tentacles betrayed his unease. But the cadet raises a valid point. If we're facing extinction anyway, General Krothos laughed, a sound like grinding metal. You're actually considering this? Releasing the Deathworlders? They call their planet Earth, but every species that's encountered them has another name for it. Hell. The command sphere fell silent again, each delegate lost in their own memories of the stories, the legends, the whispered warnings about the species from the Forbidden Sector. Beings who thrived on a world so hostile that most galactic species couldn't survive there without full environmental suits. Creatures who had evolved in a crucible of constant danger, developing capabilities that defied belief. Tell me, Zexai said quietly, his chromatophores shifting to a pattern of deep thought. What exactly do we know about their current status? It's been over 1,000 cycles since the quarantine was established. Dr. Yalix accessed the data streams. Automated monitoring shows continued technological development. They've achieved quantum processing, genetic manipulation, and concerning levels of military advancement. Population estimated at 11 billion individuals. 11 billion? Counselor Via's water form rippled with shock. On a single world? How is that sustainable? They are efficient, the Etherian admitted reluctantly, and adaptable beyond any species we've cataloged. The monitoring data shows they've survived multiple near-extinction events on their own world. Solar flares, asteroid impacts, volcanic winters, plague outbreaks that would have ended most civilizations. Each time, they've come back stronger. Cadet Lyrics pulled up a restricted file on her personal display. There's more. The quarantine beacons have recorded numerous attempts to breach the barrier from their side. Not to escape, but to explore. They keep pushing outward, testing the boundaries. The psychological profiles suggest they're not content with confinement. Of course they're not content, General Krothos growled. Predators never are. You're talking about unleashing a species that turned warfare into an art form, that split the atom just to build bigger weapons, that looked at the vast, hostile void of space and decided to throw themselves into it with primitive chemical rockets just to see what was out there. But Zexai was studying the star charts, his analytical mind running calculations. The swarm was approaching from the galactic east. The Forbidden Sector was to the galactic west. If the Deathworlders could be directed, controlled somehow. What if we didn't release them? He said slowly. What if we simply informed them of the situation? Let them know that the quarantine barriers will fail when the swarm consumes the generator stations in approximately 30 cycles. The assembly erupted in heated debate. Some saw the logic in the commander's suggestion. Others warned of trading one extinction for another. Ambassador Threx coiled tightly, her species' sign of extreme distress. You're talking about telling a hyper-aggressive species that their cage is about to open whether we want it to or not. What do you think they'll do with that information? What they've always done, Cadet Lyric said quietly, calling up historical files that most of the council had never seen. Images filled the holographic space. Humans, they call themselves. Bipedal, seemingly fragile compared to many galactic species. No natural armor, no redundant organs, no ability to regrow limbs. Just soft skin and breakable bones. But the images told a different story. Humans climbing mountains that would kill most species. Swimming in oceans filled with predators. Building cities in deserts, in tundra, in jungles that actively try to kill them. And everywhere always fighting. Fighting the environment. Fighting predators. Fighting each other. And winning. Look at them, Lyrics continued. Really look. They evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill them. And they didn't just survive. They conquered. They took a planet that should have been classified as uninhabitable and made it bow to their will. When they ran out of frontiers on their world, they looked up at the stars and decided those belonged to them too. And that's exactly why they're quarantined, Ambassador Threx insisted. They're a plague waiting to spread. Or, Zexai said, his tentacles moving in a pattern of grim determination. They're antibodies. The galaxy's immune system, locked away until needed. He turned to face the full assembly. The vote before us is simple. Do we maintain the quarantine and face certain extinction from the swarm? Or do we inform Earth of the situation and face possible extinction from them? General Krothos laughed again, but this time there was a note of resignation in it. You know what the truly terrifying part is? I've studied their military history. When faced with an external threat, they stop fighting each other. They unite. 11 billion of them, all focused on a single enemy. He paused, his four hands clenching and unclenching. The swarm has never faced anything like that. Because nothing like that should exist, the theory encountered. They're an evolutionary anomaly. A species that responded to every challenge by becoming more dangerous. Do you know what their children play? Games that simulate hunting, warfare, survival. They tell stories about monsters not to frighten, but to teach their young how to fight back. The debate raged on, but Zexai found himself studying one particular file. A recording from the First Contact War, when a single human colony ship had encountered a Galactic Council patrol. The patrol had attempted standard containment protocols. The humans had responded with violence so swift and decisive that only one council ship had escaped to report back. But what struck him wasn't the violence. It was what came after. The humans had analyzed the wreckage, reverse-engineered the technology, and within a single rotation had begun producing their own versions. Not copies, but improvements. They had taken galactic standard technology and immediately begun finding ways to make it deadlier. That was when a quarantine had been established. Not because they were savage. The galaxy had dealt with savage species before, but because they were savage and brilliant. Because they took the best of what they encountered and made it serve their purposes. Because they looked at the vast, peaceful Galactic Council and saw not a community to join, but an obstacle to overcome. Commander, Dr. Yalix interrupted his thoughts. I've completed the calculations you requested. If we send a message now, given the distance and our current communication technology, it would reach Earth in approximately 3 cycles. 3 cycles. 3 rotations to decide the fate of the galaxy. Zexai's chromatophores shifted through a spectrum of uncertainty. And their response time? Unknown. But based on their historical patterns of rapid adaptation and mobilization, the Therian paused. They could have ships launching within days of receiving the message. If they even have ships anymore, Counselor V pointed out hopefully, perhaps the quarantine has worked. Perhaps they've turned inward, abandoned their expansionist tendencies. Cadet Lyrics wordlessly pulled up the latest monitoring data. The night side of Earth blazed with lights, brighter than ever. Energy signatures suggested massive industrial capacity, and they're in orbit structures that the monitoring systems couldn't quite classify. Ships? Stations? Weapons? The resolution wasn't clear enough to tell, but one thing was certain. Humanity had not been idle. We could send a partial message, Ambassador Threx suggested desperately. Tell them about the swarm, but not about the failing barriers. Let them prepare defenses without knowing they'll soon be free. And when they detect the deception, General Krothos asked, because they will detect it. Every record we have suggests they're pathologically suspicious. It's how they survive their homeworld. Trust no one, question everything. Always have a backup plan. Zexai made his decision. We'll put it to a vote. All in favor of sending a full disclosure message to Earth, including information about the swarm threat and the timeline for barrier failure. The vote was agonizingly close. 7 species voted in favor, 6 against, with 4 abstentions. The deciding vote came from a most unexpected source. The ancient Volari delegate who had remained silent throughout the debate. The eldest member of the council, who had witnessed the First Contact War, slowly extended a withered appendage in favor. What? Ambassador Threx asked in shock. The Volari's voice was like dried leaves rustling. Because I remember how they fought. But I also remember something else. When we captured some of their soldiers, when we told them we meant no harm to their world, only to contain them, they asked us why. They wanted to understand. They have the capacity for a reason for negotiation. They simply choose violence first because their world taught them that hesitation means death. So you want to gamble the galaxy on their capacity for reason? The Etherian sparked. No, the old Volari said. I want to gamble it on their capacity for hate, because I've seen how they fight to protect their own. And if we make it clear that the swarm threatens Earth as much as it threatens us, they won't just fight. They'll wage a war of extinction. And they're very, very good at extinction. The command sphere fell silent. The vote was recorded. The decision was made. Zexhai moved to the communication console, his tentacles trembling slightly as he began composing the most important message in galactic history. How did one tell the monsters in the closet that the door was about to open? How did one wake the sleeping giant and point it in the right direction? He began simply, to the inhabitants of Earth. This is Commander Zexhai of the Galactic Council. We are transmitting on all frequencies in all languages recorded in our databases. What follows is not a deception, not a test, but a warning. Your world, and all worlds, face extinction. As the message began its journey across the stars, racing toward a blue-green world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, Zexhai couldn't shake the feeling that he had just fired the first shot in a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The swarm consumed. That was their nature. They took civilizations and reduced them to resources. But humans? Humans did something far more terrifying. They adapted. They evolved. They overcame. And they were about to be unleashed. The message from the stars arrived at 3:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, simultaneously hitting every major radio telescope array on Earth. The night shift technician at the Arecibo replacement facility nearly spilled her coffee when her screens lit up with activity unlike anything in the observatory's history. Dr. Sarah Chun stared at the data flooding her monitors, her hands trembling as she reached for the emergency contact button. Within 6 hours, every major government on Earth had the full translation. Within 12 hours, an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council was convened. Within 18 hours, humanity faced the reality that they were not alone, that they had been deliberately isolated, and that death was coming for them all. President Marcus Richardson stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the White House, surrounded by generals, scientists, and advisors. The holographic display showed the message in its entirety, translated into every major Earth language. The alien commander's words hung in the air like a challenge. So let me get this straight. General Patricia Hawkins said, her voice cutting through the chaos of 24 simultaneous conversations. The Joint Chiefs fell silent. When Hawkins spoke, people listened. Aliens exist. They've kept us in some kind of cosmic jail for 1,000 years. And now they want our help because something worse is coming. That's the simplified version, yes, Dr. James Okafor confirmed. The astrophysicist looked like he hadn't slept in the 24 hours since the message arrived. None of them had. But the implications are staggering. They have faster-than-light travel, energy weapons, force fields that have kept us contained without our knowledge. And they're scared. Good, Hawkins said bluntly. They should be scared. They locked us up like animals. With respect, General, Dr. Yuki Tanaka interjected from the Japanese Science Ministry feed. The message indicates they quarantined us because they feared us. The historical data they included suggests we gave them significant reason for concern. Richardson held up a hand for silence. At 48, he was young for a president, but his years as a Marine before entering politics showed in his bearing. I don't care why they locked us up. I care about this swarm they're describing. Dr. Okafor, your assessment? Okafor pulled up the astronomical data the aliens had provided. If their information is accurate, and our observations of unusual stellar occlusions in the outer spiral arm support it, we're looking at a consumption entity that operates on a galactic scale. They strip mine entire star systems, planets, asteroids, even the stars themselves eventually. Nothing organic survives. How long do we have? Assuming their timeline is accurate and the barriers around our system fail, when they predict 47 days until the swarm can enter our space. Maybe 60 before they reach Earth. The room erupted. Military officials demanded immediate mobilization. Scientists argued about the feasibility of mounting any defense with Earth's current technology. Politicians worried about public panic. Richardson let them argue for exactly 30 seconds before slamming his fist on the table. Enough. General Hawkins, I want every military asset we have ready for deployment. Reactivate the mothballed fleets. Cancel all leave. If it can fly and carry weapons, I want it operational. Sir, our weapons are designed for terrestrial combat. Against something that can consume planets, then we'll adapt. It's what we do. Richardson turned to the science advisors. Speaking of which, they sent technical data with their message. I want every physicist, engineer, and garage tinkerer with a security clearance looking at it. If they have FDL, shields, energy weapons, I want to know how they work and how we can build them. Dr. Chun, who had been quietly reviewing the alien database, suddenly gasped. Mr. President, you need to see this. The section on human history from their perspective. The hologram shifted, displaying records from what the aliens called the First Contact War. The room watched in stunned silence as the tale unfolded. A human colony ship, the UNS Magellan, launched in 2157 during the first wave of interstellar colonization. Humanity's first crewed FDL drive, barely functional. The ship carrying 10,000 colonists in cryosleep, searching for a new home. They had encountered what the aliens called the Galactic Council Patrol. By the Council's account, they had attempted peaceful contact. The humans had responded by immediately attacking, somehow defeating ships centuries more advanced than their own through a combination of nuclear weapons, ramming attacks, and what the aliens described with something approaching awe as tactical insanity. But what struck everyone wasn't the violence. It was what happened next. The surviving humans had cannibalized the alien vessels, reverse-engineered their technology, and used it to send a warning back to Earth. We are not alone. They're not friendly. Prepare for war. My God, someone whispered. We've been preparing for over 1,000 years without even knowing it. It was true. The message from the Magellan, received in garbled form due to the primitive nature of early FTL communication, had sparked the great militarization. Humanity had armed itself to the teeth, built fleet after fleet, developed weapons of terrifying power. All for an enemy that never came, because the aliens had quarantined Earth instead. Mr. President, Admiral Chong of the Pacific Fleet spoke up. If I'm reading this correctly, the quarantine didn't just keep us in. It kept them out. They're terrified of us. Richardson studied the data. Population figures, military assessments, psychological profiles that painted humanity as a species of unstable, hyper-aggressive apex predators who had somehow achieved sapience without losing their killing instincts. Good, he said finally. Let them be terrified. But right now we need them, and they need us. He turned to address the full assembly. Ladies and gentlemen, in 60 days, an alien swarm that eats planets is going to arrive on our doorstep. We can spend that time being angry about the quarantine, or we can do what humans have always done when faced with extinction. We adapt. We overcome. We survive. And then? General Hawkins asked quietly. Richardson's smile was sharp as a blade. Then, we have a conversation with our jailers about this quarantine. But first we save the galaxy. Because if we don't, there won't be anyone left to have that conversation with. The mobilization that followed was unlike anything in human history. Within hours of the president's address to the world, carefully crafted to prevent panic while inspiring unity, every major nation on Earth had committed their resources to the common defense. Old enemies put aside their differences. Border disputes became irrelevant. Humanity had an external enemy, and that changed everything. In Beijing, Chairman Li Wei stood before the People's Congress. The aliens fear us because we are warriors. Today, we prove they were right to fear us. But we will show them something they didn't expect. We are warriors who protect. The swarm threatens Earth. That makes them our enemy. And we do not lose to our enemies. In Moscow, President Volkov addressed his generals. For 70 years, we prepared for World War III. We built weapons that could crack continents. Today, I'm telling you those weapons aren't big enough. Build bigger ones. In London, Prime Minister Davies spoke to Parliament. They called us Deathworlders. They locked us away because we frightened them. Good. Today, we're going to show the galaxy why Earth's children are the monsters that monsters fear. But it wasn't just the governments that responded. Across the world, something remarkable happened. Humanity's greatest minds, often separated by corporate competition or national security, began working together. The technical data from the aliens was disseminated through secure networks, and within days, breakthroughs started occurring. At MIT, Dr. Raj Patel stared at the equations governing faster-than-light travel. This is insane. They're literally bending space-time. But if we adjust this parameter here, his team worked for 36 hours straight, fueled by caffeine and the knowledge that failure meant extinction. When they finally emerged, they had blueprints for humanity's first FTL drive. It was crude, power-hungry, and probably violated several laws of physics. But it would work. At CERN, Dr. Maria Gonzalez led a team analyzing the alien shield technology. It's not really a shield, she explained to the hastily assembled engineering team. It's more like selective reality. They decide what can and can't exist in a certain space. Bullets? Don't exist. Energy beams? Don't exist. It's brilliant. Can we build it? The lead engineer asked. Give me 2 weeks and unlimited resources. You have 1 week and whatever you need. In Silicon Valley, tech billionaire Marcus Zhou threw open the doors of his private space company. Forget profit margins. Forget patents. Everything we have is now available to the defense effort. My factories, my engineers, my orbital shipyards. If Earth falls, stock prices won't matter. The orbital shipyards. That was humanity's secret. For 50 years, ever since the colonization of Mars and the asteroid belt, humanity had been building. Officially, they were mining vessels, cargo haulers, colony ships. Unofficially, every single one was designed to be converted to military use within hours. Humanity had learned the lesson of Pearl Harbor, of 9/11, of every surprise attack in history. Always be ready. Always have a backup plan. And now, as Earth's hidden fleet began to reveal itself, those backup plans activated. The UNS Prometheus, officially a deep space mining vessel, shed its civilian disguise. Cargo pods detached, revealing missile batteries. Mining lasers recalibrated to military specifications. Its fusion drive, powerful enough to push millions of tons of ore, was now the heart of a warship. Across the solar system, the same transformation repeated hundreds of times. Humanity's merchant fleet became an armada. Construction ships became mobile shipyards. Even private yachts were retrofitted with weapons. But perhaps the most remarkable transformation happened not in space, but in the depths of human creativity. In a garage in Detroit, a mechanic named Tom Bradley looked at the alien technical specifications and had an idea. Hey, if their shields stop energy and kinetic weapons, what about something else? Within a week, he had prototypes for weapons that attacked on frequencies the alien shields didn't block. Sonic disruptors, gravitic hammers, exotic matter projectors that turned enemy hull plating into its own worst enemy. In Mumbai, a team of software engineers led by Priya Sharma worked on a different problem. The swarm adapts to weapons, right? So we need weapons that adapt faster. They created AI systems that could modify their attack patterns in nanoseconds, staying ahead of any defensive adaptation. In Sao Paulo, DR, Carlos Mendez pursued a different approach entirely. Why fight them ship to ship? The swarm consumes biological matter. What if we give them something to consume that they won't enjoy? His team began developing biological weapons of terrifying creativity. Viruses that turned metal into powder. Bacteria that fed on energy fields. Parasites that reprogram matter at the molecular level. 3 weeks after the message arrived, humanity had its first FTL-capable warship. The UNS Defiance, a hastily converted battlecruiser, made its maiden jump from Earth to Mars in 13 seconds. The crew emerged whooping and cheering, despite half of them suffering from what would later be called jump sickness. It's not pretty, Captain Sarah Mitchell reported to Earth Command. The ride feels like being turned inside out while someone plays drums on your skull. But it works. We can match their FTL capabilities. General Hawkins studied the report. How many ships can we convert? With the current resources? Maybe 300 in the time we have. It's not enough. Then, we'll make it enough. What about weapons? The weapons tests were illuminating. Earth scientists had taken the alien technology and immediately began finding ways to make it deadlier. Where the Galactic Council had energy beams, humans created focused gamma-ray bursters that could sterilize entire grid coordinates. Where the Council had kinetic barriers, humans developed phased ammunition that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making it nearly impossible to block. But it was in tactics where humanity truly shone. War games conducted in Earth's most advanced simulators showed human forces consistently defeating superior numbers through sheer unpredictability. Alien tactical doctrine, based on millennia of relatively civilized warfare, couldn't cope with human strategies that included ramming attacks, false surrenders, and what one admiral called aggressive reinterpretation of the laws of physics. They fight like they're civilized, observed Colonel Zhang during one simulation. We fight like we're cornered rats, and cornered rats will chew through steel to survive. As the fourth week began, long-range sensors detected the first signs of the swarm's approach. The quarantine barriers hadn't failed yet, but exotic energy readings suggested they were weakening. Humanity had perhaps 3 weeks before the swarm could enter the solar system. In the depths of Cheyenne Mountain, now the headquarters of Earth Defense Command, Richardson met with his top advisors. Where do we stand? General Hawkins pulled up the fleet statistics. 287 FTL-capable warships. Another 400 sublight defenders. We've armed everything from cargo haulers to pleasure craft. Total military personnel under arms, 47 million. Including reserves and militia, we can field nearly 200 million. Weapons. Everything from nuclear missiles to Dr. Mendez's biological nightmares. The eggheads have adapted alien tech into weapons that would make the Geneva Convention weep. Gravitic shears that can crack moons. Dimensional phase bombs that delete matter from existence. And something the tech boys are calling a stellar igniter that I'm afraid to ask too many questions about. Morale. Through the roof. Turns out telling humans that aliens imprisoned us for being too dangerous is the greatest motivational speech in history. Every soldier, sailor, and pilot is eager to prove the aliens were right. Richardson nodded slowly. And our response to the Galactic Council? Dr. Okafor cleared his throat. We prepared a message. It's diplomatic, but firm. We acknowledge the swarm threat and express our willingness to defend Earth and, by extension, assist in the defense of the galaxy. We also make it clear that we expect the quarantine to be lifted permanently and reparations to be discussed after the crisis. Reparations? Richardson raised an eyebrow. 1,000 years of enforced isolation has economic implications, Okafor said with a slight smile. But that's a discussion for after we survive. The president stood, looking at the star chart showing the swarm's approach. Hundreds of red dots, each representing a consumed star system. Trillions of lives already lost. And behind those dots, Earth. Humanity's cradle. The world that had forged them in fire and blood and made them what they were. Send the message, he ordered. Tell the Galactic Council that Earth stands ready. The Deathworlders are awake. And we're very, very angry. As the message raced back toward the Council, accompanied by telemetry showing Earth's military buildup, humanity prepared for war on a scale beyond imagination. In shipyard from Earth to the asteroid belt, welding torches blazed around the clock. In laboratories, scientists pushed the boundaries of physics and ethics alike. In training grounds, soldiers drilled with weapons that hadn't existed a month ago. But perhaps the most telling preparation happened in the quiet moments. Parents tucked their children into bed with new stories, not of monsters to be feared, but of monsters to be defeated. Teachers explained to their students that the stars were full of wonders and dangers, and that humanity would face both with courage. Artists painted, musicians composed, writers wrote, all celebrating not just human survival, but human defiance. On the observation deck of the UNS Prometheus, now bristling with weapons, Captain Mitchell stood with her crew. Through the transparent aluminum windows, Earth hung like a jewel in the void. Blue oceans, white clouds, the brown and green of continents where 11 billion humans made their stand. You know what the most terrifying thing about humans is? She asked her executive officer. Our weapons? Our tactics? Mitchell shook her head. Our hope. Any sensible species would look at the odds and surrender, accept extinction with dignity. But us? We look at a galaxy-eating swarm and think challenge accepted. We're not just going to survive this. We're going to win. And then we're going to have words with anyone who thought caging us was a good idea. Her exo grinned. The Galactic Council has no idea what they've unleashed, do they? No, Mitchell said, returning the grin. But they're about to find out. The Galactic Council's response to Earth's message arrived as Commander Zexai's tentacles trembled over the communication console. The human fleet deployment data made his chromatophores cycle through colors of disbelief. In 30 days, the quarantine species had developed FTL travel, adapted Council weapon technology, and assembled a fleet that defied all projections. This is impossible, Dr. Yalix, the Therian physicist, sparked in agitation. The technological leap required. They've compressed a millennium of development into weeks. General Krathos studied the tactical displays with grudging respect. Look at their ship configurations. They've taken our designs and made them aggressive. Every vessel is a weapon first, everything else second. Even their medical ships have armor plating and point defense systems. The human message was being replayed in the council chambers. President Richardson's face filled the holographic display, his expression carved from stone. To the Galactic Council, Earth acknowledges the swarm threat. We will defend our world. Any assistance you can provide in terms of intelligence or technology would be appreciated. Be advised, our fleets will begin deploying beyond the quarantine zone in 72 hours. Any attempts to maintain the barriers will be considered an act of war. Ambassador Threx coiled tighter. They're threatening us while asking for our help. No. Counselor V corrected, her water form rippling. They're stating facts. They'll defend themselves with or without us. The question is, do we want them as allies or enemies when this is over? Zexai had already made his decision. Open a direct channel. It's time for proper first contact. The connection established in seconds, and suddenly, the council found themselves face-to-face with humanity's leadership. President Richardson stood at the center, flanked by military officials and scientists. What struck Zexai immediately was their eyes. All of them had the same hardened look, like predators evaluating prey. Come on, Zexai. Thank you for the warning about the swarm. Earth stands ready to defend herself. Zexai's translator worked overtime to convey proper diplomatic tones. President Richardson, we are impressed by your mobilization. The Council wishes to coordinate defense efforts. You locked us in a cage for 1,000 years. The interruption came from General Hawkins, her scarred face showing no emotion. Give us one reason why we shouldn't return the favor after we deal with the swarm. The council chamber erupted in alarmed chatter, but Zexai raised a tentacle for silence. General, we understand your anger. The quarantine was perhaps excessive, but surely you can see it was done from fear, not malice. Your species' first contact was exceptionally violent. Because your patrol tried to board our ship without permission, Dr. Okafor interjected. The Magellan's logs are quite clear. Your forces attempted what you called standard containment protocol. To us, it looked like an attack. A misunderstanding then, Zexai said hopefully. One we can move past in the face of this greater threat. Richardson leaned forward. We're willing to work with you against the swarm. But let me be crystal clear, the quarantine ends now. Any attempt to re-establish it after the crisis will be met with immediate retaliation. Earth will not be caged again. You're hardly in a position to make demands, General Krathos rumbled. Your fleet is impressive for such rapid development, but you're still technologically inferior. He was cut off by laughter. Not from Richardson, but from someone off-screen. A young woman in a lab coat stepped into view, her eyes bright with manic enthusiasm. Sorry, Dr. Chen said, not sounding sorry at all. It's just technologically inferior? We cracked your FDL in 3 weeks. We've improved your shield designs by 30%. And has anyone told you about the dimensional phase weapons yet? Or Project Prometheus? Chun, Richardson warned. Right, classified. But my point stands. We're not inferior. We're different. You've had thousands of years to refine your technology. We've had 30 days to weaponize it. Want to bet which approach works better in a fight? The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, the ancient Volari delegate spoke. Perhaps we should focus on the immediate threat. The swarm will not wait for us to resolve our differences. Zexai seized the opportunity. Agreed. We're transmitting all intelligence on swarm tactics, capabilities, and weaknesses. Their primary advantage is adaptation. They analyze any attack and develop countermeasures within hours. Hours? General Hawkins smiled for the first time. That's practically geological. We adapt in minutes. Sometimes seconds if properly motivated. You don't understand, Ambassador Threx interjected. The swarm doesn't just adapt defensively. They incorporate. When they consumed the Tekri fleet, the next wave had Tekri shield technology. When they overwhelmed the Gorvax, they gained their regeneration capabilities. So they're technological magpies, Dr. Okafor mused. Interesting. What happens if they incorporate contradictory technologies? Or technologies designed to fail catastrophically? Every alien in the council chamber turned to stare at him. You would deliberately feed them trapped technology? Dr. Yalix's energy field pulsed with shock. Why not? Okafor shrugged. If they're going to steal our tech anyway, might as well make them regret it. We call them Trojan horses. Surely you have similar concepts? We know, Zexai admitted. Such deception in warfare is considered. Let me guess, Richardson interrupted. Uncivilized? Dishonorable? That's the difference between us, Commander. You fight wars. We wage them. Every tool, every strategy, every dirty trick that keeps our people alive is fair game. The discussion continued for hours, covering swarm approach vectors, fleet positions, and defensive strategies. But what became increasingly clear to the Council was that they weren't dealing with a species that thought like them. Where the Council proposed defensive lines, humans suggested aggressive raids. Where the Council recommended energy conservation, humans proposed burning through resources for maximum immediate impact. Where the Council sought to minimize casualties, humans accepted them as the price of victory. Your strategies all assume acceptable losses, Counselor V observed. 10% casualties here, 20% there. You plan for your people to die. We plan for victory, Richardson corrected. Yes, people will die, but if we win, humanity survives. If we lose, everyone dies. The math is simple. Simple, the Corthax delegate chimed, its crystalline form resonating with distress. You reduce sapient lives to mathematics. Would you prefer we reduce them to dust? Hawkins shot back. Because that's what the swarm does. At least our math serves a purpose. As the conference continued, smaller meetings broke off. Human scientists connected with their alien counterparts, sharing data and theories. What shocked the Council's researchers was how quickly humans grasped concepts that had taken other species centuries to understand. Dr. Patel was in deep discussion with the Etherian physicist about FDL mechanics. So, if we inverse the quantum field while maintaining the space-time bubble, yes, that would increase efficiency by 40%. Why haven't you tried this? Because it has a 17% chance of catastrophic cascade failure, Dr. Yalix responded. Only 17%? Patel laughed. Those are good odds. We've worked with worse. Meanwhile, human military tacticians were giving their council counterparts nightmares. Colonel Zhang walked through a holographic battle simulation with growing frustration. Why are your ships maintaining such tight formations? You're making yourselves easy targets. Coordinated fire patterns require precise positioning, the Vorthan tactical instructor explained. But you're predictable. Look, Zhang manipulated the display, showing human ships scattered seemingly at random. Quelle formation? No pattern for the enemy to analyze. Each ship fights independently, but toward a common goal. Maximum flexibility, minimum vulnerability. But how do you coordinate? We don't. We trust each captain to make the right call. That's what training is for. The Vorthan's 4 arms gestured in confusion. You enter battle with no central command? No grand strategy. Oh, we have strategy, Zhang grinned. Win. Everything else is just details. But it was in the biological warfare division that the greatest culture shock occurred. Dr. Mendez presented his work to a horrified assembly of council medical officers. This is abomination, the melody head physician sang in discordant notes. You've created living weapons, organisms designed solely to destroy. The swarm is a living weapon, Mendez countered. We're fighting fire with fire. This bacterium targets their absorption mechanisms. It makes them allergic to themselves. The more they consume, the more violent the reaction. And if it mutates, if it targets other species, then we create something to kill it, and something to kill that if necessary. We're very good at creating things that kill. It's keeping things alive that we sometimes struggle with. As the hours passed, and the The swarm drew closer. An uneasy alliance formed. The council provided intelligence and technical specifications. Humanity provided innovation and sheer bloody-minded determination. But tensions remain high. During a break in negotiations, HFY found himself alone with President Richardson in a virtual meeting room. "Your people terrify mine," the commander admitted. "Even now, working together, they see you as barely controlled predators." Richardson poured himself water from a pitcher. Such a simple action, but HFY's species would have died from the oxidation. "We know. We've always known we were different. When we first achieved spaceflight, we wondered if we'd find others like us among the stars. Instead, we found we were the monsters in everyone else's closet. Does that bother you? It used to. Some of us dreamed of peaceful first contact, of joining a galactic community, finding our place among the stars." Richardson's smile was bitter. "Instead, you caged us, called us Deathworlders, made us the enemy before we even had a chance to be friends. Perhaps after this crisis, no." The word was flat, final. "There's no going back, Commander. You've shown us what the galaxy thinks of us. When the swarm is defeated, not if, when, humanity will take its place among the stars, either as partners or as conquerors. The choice is yours." HFY's chromatophores shifted to patterns of worry. "You would wage war on the entire galaxy." "We prefer not to. We're actually quite lazy when not threatened. But we won't be caged again. We won't be told where we can and can't go. We won't accept second-class status because other species are frightened of what we might do." "And what might you do?" Richardson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "Did you know humans are the only species on our planet that domesticated predators? Wolves, big cats, even some reptiles. We took creatures that could kill us and made them family. That's what we might do, Commander. Take a galaxy full of species that fear us and make them family. But only if they let us." Before HFY could respond, alarms began blaring on both ends of the connection. The quarantine barriers had failed 3 days early. The swarm had arrived. The first reports came from Outpost Station 7, a council monitoring post on the edge of the quarantine zone. The transmission was brief, terrified, and final. "They're here. Billions of them. They're eating through our shields like tissue paper. Send help. Send static." Then, from humanity's outer defense platforms, a different tone. "Contact. Enemy forces emerging from FTL in Saturn's orbit. All ships, weapons free. Let's show these bastards why Earth is off the menu." The Battle of Saturn would later be studied by military historians across the galaxy as the moment everything changed. The moment the hunters became the hunted. The swarm emerged from hyperspace in their typical formation, a massive cloud of interconnected units, each the size of a small moon, designed to engulf and consume everything in their path. They had faced dozens of species, hundreds of defensive strategies. They had adapted to all of them. They had never faced humans. The first surprise came when humanity's defensive line simply wasn't there. The swarm's tactical algorithms, based on thousands of battles, expected organized resistance at optimal firing range. Instead, they found empty space. Then, the minefield activated. Humanity had seeded Saturn's rings with millions of autonomous weapons platforms, hidden among the ice and rock. Each platform was tiny, insignificant, until they networked together and fired simultaneously. Concentrated antimatter beams, gravity weapons, dimensional shears, all hitting the swarm from inside their own formation. The swarm's adaptation was swift. Within minutes, they had developed countermeasures to the energy weapons. Within 10 minutes, they had learned to detect the hidden platforms. But humans had planned for that. The second wave wasn't energy weapons. It was biological. Capsules hidden among the destroyed platforms ruptured, releasing Dr. Mendez's creations. Engineered organisms that fed on the swarm's own adaptation mechanisms. The more the swarm tried to analyze and counter them, the faster they spread. From his command ship, Admiral Chun watched the swarm's formation begin to convulse. Phase 2. Launch the kamikazes. "Sir, the council advisors are protesting. They say suicide attacks are our what? Uncivilized? Put them on my screen." When the protesting alien faces appeared, Chin's expression was granite. "You want civilized? These things ate 3 of your worlds. Civilized didn't work. Now shut up and watch how humans fight. The kamikaze drones weren't just explosives. Each one carried a specialized payload. Some had false FTL signatures, causing swarm units to waste energy pursuing ghosts. Others carried computer viruses that attacked the swarm's coordination networks. Still others were simply massive bombs, because sometimes the old ways worked best. But the real surprise came when the human fleet finally appeared. They emerged from FDL inside the swarm formation. Not near it, not at optimal firing range, but inside it. It was tactically insane, strategically suicidal, and absolutely brilliant. All ships, execute Operation Cuisinart, Admiral Chen ordered. The human fleet scattered in all directions, each ship choosing its own targets, its own tactics. Some fired everything they had in massive alpha strikes. Others danced through the swarm units, using superior maneuverability to avoid consumption. A few simply accelerated to maximum velocity and rammed. The UNS Thunder God, commanded by Captain Yamato, performed a maneuver that would later be called Yamato's Pirouette. Surrounded by 3 swarm units, instead of fleeing, the ship fired its FTL drive and atmosphere, creating a localized space-time distortion that caused the swarm units to partially merge. When they tried to separate, they tore each other apart. The UNS Vengeance, under Captain O'Brien, discovered that swarm adaptation had limits. By rapidly cycling through different weapon types, kinetic, energy, biological, dimensional, faster than the swarm could adapt, they created what O'Brien called adaptation lag. The swarm units couldn't keep up, their defenses always one step behind. But it was the UNS Defiant that demonstrated why humans had earned their Deathworlder title. Captain Mitchell, outnumbered 50-1, made a decision that no Council species would have considered. She overloaded her ship's reactor and flew it directly into the heart of the largest swarm unit. But this wasn't a simple suicide run. Mitchell had her engineers configure the overload to create a specific type of explosion, one that would resonate at the exact frequency of the swarm's internal communication network. For Earth were her last words as the Defiant detonated. The explosion didn't just destroy the swarm unit. It sent a feedback pulse through their entire network, disrupting their coordination for crucial minutes. In those minutes, the human fleet pressed their advantage, destroying dozens of swarm units that couldn't adapt fast enough. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Council observers watched in stunned silence as humanity employed tactics they had never imagined. Ships that should have retreated pressed attacks. Crews that should have surrendered fought to the last breath. Strategies that should have failed succeeded through sheer audacity. When the swarm finally retreated, limping back into hyperspace, they left behind the husks of 40% of their force. Humanity had lost 60 ships, nearly a quarter of their fleet. By any reasonable measure, it was a Pyrrhic victory. The humans celebrated like they had won the war. "That's impossible," General Krothos said, studying the battle data. "The casualty ratio, the damage sustained. How can they call this victory?" On the screen, Admiral Chun was already planning pursuit operations. "Because they retreated," the human explained when asked. "For the first time in recorded history, the swarm retreated. They've never done that before, which means they can be beaten, which means we can win. But your losses are acceptable. Earth survives another day. That's all that matters." Zexhai found himself reassessing everything he thought he knew about humans. They didn't fight wars like other species. They didn't measure victory in casualties avoided or resources preserved. They measured it in objectives achieved, enemies defeated, survival ensured. "Commander," Cadet Lyrics approached hesitantly. "The human president is requesting immediate council attendance. He says the real war planning starts now." As Zexhai prepared to face humanity's leadership again, one thought echoed through his mind. What had they unleashed? The swarm had retreated. The swarm that had never retreated, never hesitated, never shown any behavior beyond relentless consumption, had fled from human aggression. And the humans weren't satisfied with driving them off. They wanted to hunt them down. The monsters were out of the closet, and they were angry. The war room aboard the UNS Imperator was unlike any military command center the Galactic Council had ever seen. Where their species favored clean lines and calming colors, humans had built a chamber that breathed aggression. Holographic displays showed real-time battle data in angry reds and violent purples. The walls were lined with weapons, not ceremonial pieces, but functional tools of war, ready to be grabbed at a moment's notice. President Richardson stood at the central planning table, surrounded by humanity's military leadership and, for the first time in 1,000 years, alien observers. The council delegation looked distinctly uncomfortable in the harsh lighting and recycled air that humans found normal. The swarm retreated here, General Hawkins indicated on the star map, her cybernetic hand creating a trail of light through the hologram. Long-range sensors tracked them for 12 light-years before we lost the signal. They're hurt but not beaten. Then, we finish them, growled Admiral Petrov from the European fleet. We have momentum. We should press the attack. With what? Ambassador Threx interjected, her serpentine form coiled in distress. You lost a quarter of your fleet. You need time to rebuild, to consolidate. We need to attack, Colonel Zhang interrupted. Every moment we give them is a moment to adapt, to develop counters to our strategies. We hit them now while they're still reeling. Zexai's chromatophores shifted to patterns of concern. You're talking about pursuing an enemy into unknown space with damaged ships and depleted resources. It's suicide. It's human, Richardson said simply. Show them the projections, Dr. Okafor. The physicist manipulated the display, showing branching probability paths. Based on the swarm's observed behavior and adaptation rates, if we give them more than 7 days to regroup, they'll return with countermeasures to everything we used at Saturn. Our advantage disappears. But if we pursue now, maintain pressure, we have a 63% chance of preventing their recovery. 63%? Counselor Via's water form rippled. You would risk everything on barely better than half odds. We've won wars with worse, General Hawkins said. But this isn't just about odds. It's about psychology. The swarm has never been hunted before. They don't know how to handle being prey. We need to exploit that before they learn. Dr. Yalix sparked with agitation. The swarm doesn't have psychology. They're a collective consumption entity. They don't feel fear or uncertainty. Everything feels fear when it's being hunted properly, a new voice said. Captain Sarah Mitchell entered the war room, her uniform still showing scorch marks from the Defiant's final battle. Half the room stared in shock. Captain Mitchell, Zexai's translator, struggled with the concept. But your ship we saw destroyed. Mitchell grinned. You saw it explode. Different thing. I had my crew evacuate in stealth pods before the overload. Oldest trick in the human playbook. Let the enemy think you're dead, then hit them when they're not expecting it. You sacrificed the capital ship as a deception. General Krathos's 4 arms moved in gestures of disbelief. I sacrificed a ship to kill 40 swarm units and live to fight another day. Good trade. Mitchell moved to the planning table. Mr. President, I volunteer the Defiant's crew for the pursuit force. We owe those things for our ship. Richardson nodded. Your new command will be ready in 6 hours. The UNS Retribution. Try not to blow this one up unless absolutely necessary. No promises, sir. The council delegation exchanged worried glances. These humans celebrated a captain who had deliberately destroyed her own ship, who had played dead in the middle of a battle. What kind of species thought like this? We need to discuss the pursuit strategy, Richardson continued. Dr. Chun, show them Project Wolfpack. The young scientist's eyes gleamed as she brought up a new display. We've been analyzing the swarm's movement patterns. They travel in a massive group for protection and resource sharing. But that also makes them predictable. Slow. Vulnerable to what we call persistence hunting. Persistence hunting? Ambassador Threx asked warily. Ancient human technique, Dr. Chun explained with disturbing enthusiasm. Our ancestors would chase prey for hours, days even. Not fast enough to catch them in a sprint, but we just kept coming. The prey would exhaust itself running. We just walk after it, patient, relentless, until it couldn't run anymore. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. Even their predator species had never conceived of such a thing. You want to exhaust a machine swarm? Dr. Yalix questioned. Everything has limits, Chin continued. The swarm uses energy to move, to adapt, to consume. Make them use it faster than they can replenish. Harry them. Strike and fade. Make them chase ghosts. Make them adapt to threats that don't exist. exhaust their resources. Then, when they're depleted, she smiled. We go for the throat. General Crothos studied the projections. Despite himself, he was impressed. This requires perfect coordination across multiple fleets. One mistake, and the swarm could turn and consume your harassment forces. Then, we don't make mistakes, Admiral Chen said. We've divided our remaining fleet into wolf packs. 20 ships each, mixed capabilities. Fast enough to run, strong enough to hurt them, smart enough to work independently. Without central coordination, the Vorthan tactical advisor was aghast. How do you prevent friendly fire? Tactical conflicts? Command disputes? Trust, Richardson said simply. Each pack has objectives, not orders. How they achieve them is up to the pack leader. We trust our people to make the right decisions. That's insane, Counselor V protested. That's human, Colonel Jean corrected. We're not a hive mind. We're not a collective. We're individuals who choose to work together. That makes us unpredictable, adaptable, dangerous. The debate continued for hours. The council delegates argued for caution, for building defenses, for gathering more intelligence. The humans pushed for immediate action, for aggression, for taking the fight to the enemy. It was like watching two completely different philosophies of existence clash. Finally, the ancient Volari delegates spoke. You've already decided, haven't you? This discussion is merely a courtesy. Richardson met the alien's multifaceted gaze. The pursuit fleets launch in 4 hours, with or without council support. But we prefer with. Your technology, combined with our tactics, gives us the best chance. And if you fail, if the swarm destroys your pursuit forces and returns stronger, then Earth will fight with whatever's left. And if that fails, we'll fight with sticks and stones. And if that fails, we'll fight with teeth and nails. We don't stop, ever. The silence stretched. Then, unexpectedly, General Crothos laughed, a sound like grinding metal. By the 7 suns, you're all insane. Completely, utterly insane. He paused. Count the Vorthan fleet in. If we're going to die, might as well die attacking. One by one, other species committed forces. Not many. Most were too cautious, too afraid. But some saw what the Vorthan saw. If humanity could make the swarm retreat, perhaps their insanity was exactly what the galaxy needed. As the meeting broke up, Zexhai found himself walking with Captain Mitchell toward the observation deck. Through the transparent walls, Earth's shipyards were visible. The activity was frantic. Ships half-built were being rushed to completion. Civilian vessels were being retrofitted with weapons. Even amid the destruction from Saturn, humanity was building, preparing, adapting. Can I ask you something, Captain? Shoot. When you flew your ship into the swarm unit, were you afraid? Mitchell considered the question. Terrified, but fear's just another data point. It tells you the stakes are high. The trick is not letting it make decisions for you. But you could have died. Could have. Probably should have. But dying was acceptable if it meant victory. She paused at the observation window. That's what your council doesn't understand, Commander. Every human down there, all 11 billion, we've already accepted we might die in this war. Once you accept that, really accept it, you're free. Free to fight without holding back. Free to do whatever it takes to win. That's horrifying. No, Mitchell said softly. That's human. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day. Storms, predators, diseases, disasters. Death was always one mistake away. So we learned to look death in the eye and spit in its face. We learned that the only way to survive was to be more stubborn than the universe itself. She turned from the window. The swarm thinks it's the apex predator of the galaxy. It's about to learn what happens when you corner a species that's been preparing for this fight since we first looked up at the stars. For hours later, the pursuit began. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, began jumping into hyperspace. But not as one massive force. Instead, they left in small groups scattered across multiple vectors. The wolf packs, each one a self-contained instrument of harassment and destruction. Wolfpack Alpha, led by the newly christened UNS Retribution under Captain Mitchell, was the first to make contact. They found the swarm's trail 3 days out from Saturn, a wake of disrupted space-time and exotic particles that told of a massive force moving at maximum speed. They're running, Lieutenant Commander Torres reported. Actual, honest-to-God running. Not running, Mitchell corrected, studying the readings. Regrouping. Look at these energy patterns. They're reconfiguring on the move. Adapting. To what? To us. They're trying to predict what we'll do next. Mitchell's smile was predatory. Let's disappoint them. Signal the pack. We're going to hit their trailing edge and see how they react. The attack was surgical. 5 ships dropped from hyperspace, launched a coordinated strike on the rearmost swarm units, then jumped away before retaliation could arrive. The damage was minimal in the grand scheme. 3 swarm units disrupted, maybe 1 destroyed. But that wasn't the point. Within hours, the swarm had shifted formation, allocating resources to defend their rear. Energy that should have gone to speed now went to defense. They slowed just fractionally. Wolfpack Beta hit them from the flank. Wolfpack Gamma created false sensor readings that suggested a massive fleet ahead. Wolfpack Delta deployed Dr. Mendez's latest creation, a biological agent that didn't damage the swarm, but made them glow across every spectrum, ruining their stealth capabilities. For the Council observers monitoring from safe distance, it was a masterclass in psychological warfare against an enemy that supposedly had no psychology. They're reacting, Dr. Yalix reported, his energy form flickering with amazement. The swarm is actually showing behavioral changes. They're becoming cautious. No, General Krothos corrected, studying the tactical display. They're becoming confused. Look at their formation. They can't decide whether to continue fleeing or turn and fight. The humans aren't giving them time to analyze. By the time they adapt to one attack vector, 3 new ones have emerged. It went on for days. The wolf packs took turns, some attacking, some resting, some preparing new strategies. They used every dirty trick in humanity's extensive playbook. False retreats that turn into ambushes. Decoy fleets that existed only in sensor ghosts. Weapons that seemed biological but were actually energy-based, forcing constant readaptation. Captain Yamato, leading Wolfpack Epsilon, discovered that the swarm had trouble with paradoxes. He had his ships broadcast contradictory sensor data, appearing to be in 2 places at once, showing as both massive dreadnoughts and tiny fighters. The swarm wasted precious processing power, trying to resolve the impossible readings. Admiral Petrov's Wolfpack Theta took a different approach. They didn't attack at all. Instead, they shadowed the swarm at maximum sensor range, broadcasting a single message on repeat. We're coming. We're coming. We're coming. The psychological pressure of being stalked by an enemy that wouldn't engage was a new experience for the swarm. But it was Captain O'Brien's Wolfpack Iota that made the crucial discovery. "Captain, I'm reading something odd," his sensor operator reported. "There's a pattern in the swarm's formation changes. It's subtle, but I think they're protecting something." O'Brien studied the data. Center mass, slightly forward of geometric center. Whatever it is, they're keeping it wrapped in their highest density units. "A command node?" his XO suggested. "Or something worse. Type beam to command. Tell them we may have found a weak point." The response came from President Richardson himself. "All Wolfpacks converge on Iota's position. Prepare for decisive engagement. The real hunt begins now." As the human fleet gathered for what might be the final battle, the swarm did something unprecedented. They sent a message. It was simple, broadcast and mathematical concepts that any spacefaring civilization could understand. Cease pursuit. Mutual termination probability high. Recommend cessation of hostilities. The bridge of the retribution went silent. Then Mitchell laughed. "They're trying to negotiate. The all-consuming swarm wants to talk terms." "Should we respond?" Torres asked. "Oh, we'll respond," Mitchell said, her eyes hard. "All hands, battle stations. Signal the fleet. The swarm just showed us they can fear. Now, let's teach them they should." The Battle of the Void, as it would come to be known, was about to begin. And for the first time in galactic history, the swarm would learn what it meant to be the hunted instead of the hunter. But in the depths of space, something else stirred. The swarm's message hadn't been a plea. It had been a warning. Because the humans had been right about one thing. The swarm was protecting something in their center mass. Something that had been sleeping. Something that was about to wake up. The assembled human fleet hung in the void like predators circling wounded prey. 200 ships, scarred from battle, but hungry for the kill. Around them, the swarm had formed a defensive sphere 20,000 kilometers in diameter. Their units locked in a formation so dense it appeared solid on sensors. On the bridge of the Retribution, Captain Mitchell studied the tactical display. They're not running anymore. Whatever's in that center mass, they'll die protecting it. Maybe that's the point, Dr. Chen said from the science station. She'd insisted on joining the final battle, claiming her expertise might be needed. What if it's not something they're protecting, but something they're containing? Before Mitchell could respond, every sensor on every human ship scream alerts. The swarm sphere was opening, units pulling back like a flower blooming in reverse. From a center emerged something that made veteran soldiers step back from their displays. It was beautiful and terrible. A crystalline structure the size of Earth's moon, composed of what looked like frozen starlight. It pulsed with colors that human eyes shouldn't have been able to see, yet somehow did. And from it emanated a presence, a pressure against reality itself that made hardened warriors feel like children afraid of the dark. All ships, hold position. Richardson's voice came through the fleet comm. Nobody fires until we know what we're dealing with. The Galactic Council observers, watching from what they thought was safe distance, reacted with primal terror. No, Ambassador Threx whispered, her serpentine form going rigid. They didn't. They couldn't have been so foolish. What is it? Zexai demanded. A harvester. The ancient Volari's voice was barely audible. The swarm didn't develop naturally. They were created. Weapons from the last Great War, 10 million years ago. We thought they were all destroyed. Created by whom? General Krothos asked, though he feared the answer. The predecessors. The race that came before all of us. They fought a war that,